Shana Tova. You may remember this scene from Fiddler on the Roof. Perchik tells a group of men that they should pay attention to what's happening in the world, and Tevye pronounces, he's right. One of the men retorts, why should I break my head about the outside world? Let the outside world break its own head. Tevye thinks for a moment and thoughtfully says, he's right. A third man wags his finger and says, he's right and he's right. They can't both be right. And Tevye, doling out milk from his cart, answers, you know, you're also right. It's a quintessentially Jewish conversation. Two opposing propositions, which are both right, then a third is thrown in, which is also right. There's a reason why they say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But in this past year, it seems we've forgotten how this goes. Instead, friendships, families, and communities are breaking apart by the finger wagger's assertion that they can't both be right, by the presumption that for me to be right, you must be wrong. There's a passage in the Talmud that describes the ongoing disputes between the sages Hillel and Shammai over matters of Jewish law. It says, for 3 years, the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai argued. One said, our opinion is right, and the other said, our opinion is right. A heavenly voice broke in. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim hem. Both these and those are the words of the living God. This is unexpected. Instead of simply declaring who is right, the heavenly voice announces that there is something divine flowing through both camps, even if their conclusions are in opposition. It's a radical thought. The argument of the person we are so quick to dismiss as wrong is nonetheless divinely inspired. And then, in the Talmud text, the law is decided with Hillel. Wait, what? I thought they were both right. The other sages were surprised too. The Talmud text continues. A question was raised. Since the heavenly voice declared both these and those are the words of the living God, why was the law with Hillel? It is because the students of Hillel were kind and gracious. They taught their own ideas as well as the ideas from the students of Shammai. Not only that, but they went so far as to teach Shammai's opinions first. This story teaches that there is value in learning both sides of an argument, even if one will prevail in the end. Sometimes a decision needs to be made, a course laid. Perceiving divinity on all sides doesn't change that. Rabbi Micah Goodman explains that there are 2 sides to Jewish discourse. There's an intellectual side and a practical side. Intellectually, we are expected to study divergent views because both have value. Practically, we're expected to follow the law. The Jewish expectation, then, is to have an intellectual world that is wider than the practical world. The world we live in pushes us in the opposite direction. Social media algorithms create echo chambers where everything we read supports everything we think, shrinking our intellectual world down to narrow straits of confirmation bias. A peek behind the curtain. After I wrote that sentence, narrow straits of confirmation bias, I was curious about narrow straits, so I went to Google. Here's what it said. A strait is a narrow body of water that connects two larger bodies of water. Straits are often created by a fracture in the land connecting the bodies of water. When the stress between geological plates becomes too great, the plates suddenly slip past each other, causing the brittle ground to crack. Straits can be difficult to navigate and may not be navigable at all. Translate all that science into the language of human interaction around polarizing issues, and it has something to say. A strait is a narrow connection between two individuals. Narrow straits are often created by a fracture in communication. When the stress between ideological positions becomes too great, the people suddenly slip past each other, causing the brittle relationship to crack. Straits can be difficult to navigate and may not be navigable at all. King David knew narrow straits. He wrote in Psalm 118 that we sing at every festival, Min hametzar karatiya, anani v'merkavya. From a narrow place I called out to God. God answered me with divine expansiveness. I wonder, can we too respond to narrowness with expansiveness? I think we can. We can navigate the narrow straits of confirmation bias by widening the expanse of our intellectual world and listening for that divine voice saying, Elu ve'elu, these and those are the words of the living God. These and those both have value. It may be counterintuitive and countercultural, but it is very Jewish for opposing ideas to both have value. Rabbi Simcha Bunim taught that we should always keep two truths in our pockets. In one pocket, I am but dust and ashes. And in the other, for my sake, the world was created. If we were to live our lives by only one of these truths, either one, it isn't hard to imagine that that wouldn't end well. In psychology, the coexistence of opposing truths is called dialectics. We can love someone and hate them. We can be excited about a change and terrified of it. We can grieve the loss of a loved one and be glad that their suffering is over. We can care about the Israelis and the Palestinians. Therapists teach people struggling with dialectic moments to practice self-compassion and accept the opposing but interconnected thoughts. Psychologist Phil Glickman writes that our mental health can be heavily determined by how we accept the dialectics that confront us. And I would suggest our relationships will be heavily determined by how we accept the dialectics between us. Some of us feel that our concern for Palestinians isn't welcome in the Jewish community. Some of us feel that our concern for Israelis isn't welcome anywhere else. Some feel that acknowledging any degree of truth in a different perspective on the Middle East is a betrayal of people and values we hold dear. But it doesn't have to be that way. The world is not a zero-sum game. Reducing issues to binary propositions strips them of all complexity and nuance. Accepting that conflicting perspectives might both be true can be unsettling. But if we apply the therapeutic practices to our difficult conversations, and if we proceed with compassion and understanding, I believe we can do it. Remember why Hillel's opinion prevailed over Shammai's? Because Hillel showed honor and kindness to Shammai by hearing him out before presenting his own opinion. In the narrow straits we are trying to navigate at this time, we cannot afford to do otherwise. Because if we are not careful, our narrow straits will quickly become dire straits. One way we can process accepting dialectical truths is by employing a technique they use at improv theater called yes and. Imagine an improv scene about a trip to the zoo on a hot day. First person says, "Let's go to the zoo." Second one says, "Yes, and if it gets too hot, we can cool off in the penguin house." Then the next says, "Yes, and I've been to the penguin house. I love watching those little guys waddle," and so on. In improv, yes and creates an ongoing conversation that develops as the scene progresses. Yes and is a useful tool also in conversation, and not an easy one. Essentially, it means replacing the word but with the word and. In real life, the zoo conversation, this is not a zoo congregation. In real life, the zoo conversation might more likely go, "Let's go to the zoo, but it's too hot." End of conversation. The yes and technique to keep the improv scene going requires creativity, patience, and practice. In real-life conversations on issues where we might disagree, a yes and approach requires creativity, patience, and practice, plus humility, curiosity, an expansive mind, and an open heart. But we are not in an improv group. We are in the perilous real world. I will tell you, I am scared. I don't know the end of the story we are slogging through. What will become of American democracy after November? Will the war in the Middle East ever end? If and when it does, what will remain amidst all the devastation, both on the ground and in our souls? Will it tear us apart? How far will anti-Semitism go? Will anywhere be safe for Jews? The uncertainty of this moment leaves me feeling unmoored, adrift. Perhaps you feel it too. Such radical uncertainty about the future can lead us to despair, to lose hope. But I think it's in our nature to fight despair, and so we compensate by hanging on desperately to whatever certainties we feel we do have, few as they may be. The desire for certainty is what makes us peek at the end of the book to see if the heroine survives. Certainty grounds us and gives us a sense of moral clarity. But certainty can also make us hold too tightly to narrow perspectives and close ourselves off from other views and the people who hold them. Certainty can quickly become rigidity, and rigid things are more likely to break. The mighty oak can be broken by a strong wind. I can tell you that by the oak in my backyard. But the flexible willow will survive the storm. On Rosh Hashanah, we read Yehuda Amichai's poem, "The Place Where We Are Right." From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a courtyard. But doubts and loves loosen the earth like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where a house once stood, now destroyed. The place where we are right doesn't allow for growth. Certainties may make us feel safe, but they can also harden us and prevent the flowering of understanding. Doubt and love may unsettle us, but they create the space for truth and compassion if we can widen our perspectives enough. The High Holy Days are the time to reflect on the hardened and narrow places where we are certain we are right. One of the sins we just recited in the Vidui several times is the sin of kishui oref, being stiff-necked. Think about it. When you have a stiff neck, you literally can't turn your head to see anything outside your range of vision. In Exodus, God sees that the Israelites are stiff-necked and wants to destroy them because of it. Rashi interprets that they turn their backs and refuse to listen. And then another commentator adds, such people will reject even what they know to be true if it conflicts with what's good or convenient for themselves. In a book published just last month, sociologist Ilana Redstone calls this kind of resolute unwillingness to consider views other than our own the certainty trap. Caught in the certainty trap, we assume not only that you must be wrong for me to be right, but that there must be something wrong with you. Be honest. Have you never wondered what's wrong with all the Americans on the other side of an election? When we are in the certainty trap, says Redstone, we tend to dismiss those who disagree with us as hateful, ignorant, or just plain stupid. The problem is that sometimes those people are our parents or our children, our friends, coworkers, fellow congregants. Then our certainty comes at a very high cost. It can literally destroy the house. I'm pretty sure Ilana Redstone is Jewish, but even if she isn't, her concern about certainty is. Because I think Judaism abhors certainty like nature abhors a vacuum. When God calls Abraham to be the patriarch of all future Jews, God tells him, leave everything you know and head out to some undetermined place. When Moses asks for God's name, God answers, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be what I will be. We are Yisrael, the ones who wrestle. The Unatana Tokef we just recited seems like certainty. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Who shall live and who shall die? But then, wait for it, Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah can shift the decree. Emanuel Rackman wrote, a Jew dare not live with absolute certainty, not only because certainty is the hallmark of the fanatic, but also because doubt is good for the human soul. One way to avoid certainty traps, says Ilana Redstone, is to start asking questions and to do so while understanding that the most important thing often isn't answering the questions, but generating them. Abraham Joshua Heschel said, we are closer to God when we are asking questions than we are when we think we have the answers. I have mentored conversion students for over 25 years. Almost without exception, the major appeal Judaism has for them is its openness to questions. There is truth to the old joke that a Jew will always answer a question with another question. Of course, not all questions are the same. Tone matters. Intent matters. Our sages understood this. In the Passover Seder, the wicked child asks a question, but does so scornfully and not out of any genuine interest or curiosity. The wise child asks in order to learn. Tempering our certainty with curiosity is not easy. It requires a change in paradigm. We spend our earliest years in school rewarded for producing the right answer and keeping our eyes on our own papers. So it shouldn't surprise us that our natural curiosity dwindles as we age. A typical 5-year-old asks 65 questions a day, predominantly beginning with, why? By the age of 8, this drops to 41 questions. And by the time we are adults, we pose a mere 6 questions each day, primarily centered around when, where, or how much. We begin our educational journey as question marks and graduate as periods. And when it really matters, we become exclamation points. On Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Spilker taught us the acronym PLANTS for how to effectively respond in difficult conversations. The A in PLANTS stands for ask. Engage with questions born of genuine curiosity about our opponent's views without hostility or cynicism. It's good advice, and we need to follow it. But it only gets us halfway there. To avoid the certainty trap, we not only need to judge others less, but we need to question ourselves more. In the coming year, I challenge all of us to take curiosity a step further and ask not just about the other person's perspectives, but to question our own positions, motivations, and certainties. I challenge us to avoid the certainty trap and the danger it poses to relationships by pausing and asking ourselves a couple of overarching questions. Ask with genuine curiosity, what is my goal in this conversation? What am I trying to do? Might there be any pertinent information I am missing? And perhaps most importantly, what else is at stake besides the topic at hand? And as we engage with someone in conversation, there are another 4 questions I think are worth asking ourselves. They come out of the Musar tradition, the trait of Shmirat Halashon, mindful speech. 1, does this need to be said? 2, does it need to be said now? 3, does it need to be said by me? And 4, will it be beneficial? Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me? And will it be beneficial? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be passionate about our values or take a stand against injustice. Redstone says at the very beginning of her book, avoiding certainty doesn't mean we can't say this is right and this is wrong. It just means we need to understand what is informing our passions, the extent to which our speech can actually make a difference, and as I said, what else is at stake. We can take a stand and still choose to be curious, to ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. It's so easy to write off people who disagree with us, to post a rant on social media, or fire off a scathing email. But the easy way usually isn't the best way. If we can slow ourselves down and respond with curiosity rather than react with hostility, we may discover that the connecting straits are wider than we think. If we can expand our intellectual world beyond our immediate one, we may discover that, in fact, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim hem. These and those are the words of the living God. In Psalm 118, King David called for God from the narrow place. Min hametzar karatiya. And God answered, Bamerchavya, with divine expansiveness. When we find ourselves constricted by our own narrow-mindedness, when our certainties stiffen our necks so that we can't see past the hardened place where we are right, when our positions jeopardize our relationships, Anenu, God, Bamerchavya, bless us with expansiveness, so that instead of being closed, we can be open. Instead of being right, we can be loved. Understanding can flower, and whispers can be heard. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.
Adonai,